Hello everybody and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. According to the Centers for Disease Control, every year about 1.5 million people suffer from traumatic brain injuries or TBIs. Leading causes are car accident, firearms, and falls. About 50,000 of these injured people die and 85,000 end up with some type of permanent disability as a result of a TBI. Some injured people are declared brain dead and eventually are disconnected from life support. The majority of transplanted organs come from brain dead people or cadavers, and one deceased donor can help to improve the lives of or save the lives of up to 55 people. There continues to be a great deal of controversy about brain death among doctors and academic lawyers, government agencies, and families with brain dead family members. Brain death is currently defined as the irreversible loss of all brain function. The brainstem controls brain function and many bodily functions like breathing and heart rate. Diagnosing brain death depends in part that the brainstem be determined to be non-functioning. The determination of brain death also requires identification of underlying causes, and these must be determined to be irreversible. Additionally, all confounding factors must be eliminated, such as hypothermia, intoxication, and severe electrolyte imbalances. An apnea test is administered to determine if the person attempts to breathe after disconnection from a ventilator. There are many other required tests that have to be performed at very specific intervals, multiple times, and with the assistance of several medical personnel. Once the person is declared brain dead, he's disconnected from all of the support. In some cases, people who have severe brain injuries are not declared brain dead, but rather are considered to be in a persistent vegetative state. And this is defined as being in a chronic state of unconsciousness for at least 4 weeks. PVS is different than a coma. Comatose patients are never conscious, while a patient with PVS may have periods of limited wakefulness, and how you can tell is by an eye or body movement or groaning sounds. It's considered highly unlikely that patients will recover from PVS, and the consensus is that the longer the person is in a vegetative state, less likely the chance of recovery. If the patient or someone with power of attorney is signed a do not resuscitate or what's called a DNR order, the patient is removed from life support when doctors have determined that there's no chance for recovery. If there's no DNR in place, the family can seek a court order to remove the patient from life support. In some cases, there's a difference of opinion between doctors and the family, or even among family members, about whether or not a person should be disconnected from life support. You probably have seen some of these stories on TV. Opposition to a declaration of brain death or no chance for recovery should probably be taken a lot more seriously, since many cases of, quote, narrow escape have been recorded in medical journals and in consumer publications. There are hundreds of cases of brain death survivors who've been pronounced dead, but yet return to life. Fortunately, more attention is being paid to this issue, and recently Medscape published an article reporting varying points of view concerning the issue and the difficulties associated with determining who is and who is not actually dead. The article included the story of 21-year-old Zach Dunlap, who listened to a doctor tell his parents he was brain dead. While being prepared for organ donation, he managed to move his arm purposefully to notify the medical staff that he was very much alive. He recovered, spent time in a rehab hospital, and appeared on the Today Show in 2008 to tell his story. Many other such stories have been reported by numerous news outlets. For example, Stephen Thorpe was 17 years old when he was severely injured in a multi-car accident and ended up in a medically induced coma. His parents were told by doctors that he would never recover and asked that he become an organ donor. Stephen's father refused to accept the doctor's declaration and hired his own expert, who said that she detected slight brain waves in his son. 5 weeks after being brought out of the coma, Stephen was discharged from the hospital with an almost full recovery. James Bernat, MD, is an expert on brain death who says that the current methods for evaluation are fraught with error and patients are being declared brain dead who are not. Very disturbing is a Robert Schade, MD, who argues that using more caution would reduce the number of brain dead organ donors. He says that organs should be harvested from patients who are nearly dead and that a formal determination of brain death is unnecessary. His reasoning is that waiting until brain-injured patients are declared officially dead causes damage to organs and says, and this is a quote, "Any organ donor would want the organs to be in the best possible condition and as many organs used as possible for transplantation." Now, for the record, I personally plan to be an organ donor, and I agree with this statement with a very important caveat, that I'm really dead at the time of the donation. I feel very strongly about that. Sade says, however, that if we weren't so picky about waiting for people to be declared, really declared dead, as many as 6,684 more organs could be donated and the waiting list could be wiped out, if only. The Uniform Determination of Death, or UDDA, has been adopted in all 50 states and defines death as the irreversible cessation of circulatory and respiratory functions, or the irreversible cessation of all functions in the entire brain, including the brainstem. But debate continues about the criteria. Dr. Burnett says the process for determining brain death is considered infallible, but based on the stories, perhaps not. Another disturbing issue highlighted in the Medscape article is the fact that a 2016 study of 508 United States hospitals showed that there were significant inconsistencies in the number of tests required, the waiting time in between tests that are used to determine brain death. Only 1/3 of hospitals required the physician making the determination to have expertise in neurology. Some institutions showed more caution than others, and the policies of some hospitals seemed to be not very well thought out at all. There are currently efforts underway to create some type of universal guidelines, but this remains a work in progress, which means that all of this stuff complicates the decision-making issue for families. In the meantime, with some degree of regularity, people who are considered dead continue to wake up. A website called Real Science Radio features stories of such people, and these stories clearly show that experts are often wrong about who is really dead. I'll share a personal story that happened to us about 10 years ago. Dr. Antonia Demas, founder of the Food Studies Institute, presented at one of our national conferences. Dr. Demas, who earned her PhD in nutrition at Cornell University, has dedicated her life to helping children to eat better by conducting in-school educational programs. She's been very successful at this. During her lecture while she was here, she told the story of a recent experience she had at the time helping a woman whose son was declared brain dead after serious injuries from an accident. He had been in a vegetative state for well over a year, and doctors were urging her to allow them to disconnect him from life support. She told Dr. Demas that her mother's intuition told her that her son was still very much alive. She sought out Dr. Demas, and this is very interesting, because she was convinced that one of the reasons her son was unresponsive was due to the fact that he was being fed via an IV and had not been given any nutritious food. After the young man was transferred to a hospice facility, Dr. Demas prepared an extremely densely nutritious vegetable soup, blended it carefully, and started tube feeding the young man. In a few days, he sat up and started talking, explaining that he was well aware that his doctors thought he was dead, heard all of the conversations between his doctors and his mom, and prayed for her to not give up on him. Perhaps we should tube feed vegetable soup to brain dead or vegetative patients before we declare them officially dead. I don't know if this would work, but I don't think it could probably hurt much, right? I think it's definitely time for medicine to acknowledge that there is so much we don't know about the human body, the brain, the will to live, and how to measure consciousness, and many other aspects of both life and death. A little less certainty and a little more caution would go a long way in avoiding mistakes, one of which may be ending the lives of people who are thought to be, but really are not dead. So I think that's enough for today. Please hit the subscribe button in the corner of your screen. Get your friends on board to get these videos every week. We try to cover a lot of interesting topics that I think people should know about. This is one of them, in case this ever happens to someone in your family. Pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you next week with more news.